Morrison can't get meatheads at Bondi Beach to wear masks, and he's laying down the law to the Taliban. It's chump change. He'd have it in the ashtray of his car. He's throwing his weight around a bit at the moment.
Can you believe the images we're seeing out of Afghanistan?
No. Can anyone? We're seeing the fall of a country in real time, because apparently even the Taliban is addicted to Insta, which means we're seeing all their atrocities as well as their celebrations. This is like a modern-day equivalent of the barbarians at the gates of Rome, and we're watching it on our couches with a glass of wine. It's just bizarre. We have guys with rocket launchers in downtown Kabul celebrating at what looks like Afghanistan's equivalent of Sideshow Alley. They're hitting the gym. We have shootings. We've got public beheadings. China and Russia are moving to establish diplomatic relations with the Taliban. The US is hoping 6,000 Marines can hold Kabul airport for a few more days. And what does Scott Morrison do? He issues a media statement demanding that the Taliban do the right thing. I'm not making this up. Here's our Prime Minister's contribution to the biggest military catastrophe since the fall of Saigon. And I quote, "The Taliban must cease all violence against civilians and adhere to international humanitarian law and the human rights all Afghans are entitled to expect, in particular women and girls." He then goes on, "The Taliban will be held fully accountable for any killing or other mistreatment of the Afghan military." And this is the best bit. "Afghan government officials and elected political leaders are fully entitled to be treated with safety, respect and dignity." Does he know who he's talking to? These guys faced down the British Empire in the 1870s, Russia in the 1980s, and went toe-to-toe with the US Army for 2 decades, and they won every time. Morrison can't get meatheads at Bondi Beach to wear masks, and he's laying down the law to the Taliban. At least he's come clean with the veterans that this whole sorry saga was a waste of time and lives.
It's a time of deep and uncomfortable questioning, and that is only right.
What a shit show.
Well, we can't do much about that. Back home, Clive Palmer's lawyers are busy again.
It's another never-ending shit show. Just when you think this guy can't get any lower, he starts digging. Clive's now saying he's going to go to the High Court to challenge the WA government's decision to require those vaccine passports if you want to enter the Kingdom of Mark. And you know what grinds my gears more than that?
What?
He's welching on a debt. He owes WA $1 million in legal costs from when we had to lawyer up to fight another one of his ridiculous High Court challenges. This was the one about whether or not hard borders were constitutional. And he's refusing to pay. Do you know how long it takes Clive Palmer to earn $1 million?
Probably not long.
A day. 1 day. It's chump change. He'd have it in the ashtray of his car. There's a Chinese company called CITIC Pacific, which has an iron ore mine 100 clicks south of Karratha. Clive owns the land that it's on. He owns the tenements. And CITIC gives him $1 million a day for the right to dig up his dirt. I got my Google on about this. The ABS says average weekly earnings in Australia are about $1,700. So Clive owing $1 million is like an ordinary person owing $244. It's a speeding fine.
So he's like a pest. We just can't get rid of him.
Well, yeah, we call him a pest, but there's actually an official term for this. It's called being a vexatious litigator. These are people the courts have decided aren't interested in resolving a particular matter. They just like the legal drama. People who have a series of failed court judgments, like Clive, can be accused of what they call abuse of process. Now, that's an early marker of someone becoming a vexatious litigant. The good news for us is if Clive is determined to be vexatious, then it will restrict how often he can lodge writs. The bad news is judges are loath to label someone a vexatious litigant because that itself triggers a long-running court case to prove that he or she is. Which means, as always, the only real winners are the lawyers.
Lawyers would be busy with this Woodside-BHP deal. What do you make of it?
Well, it's a very, very big deal. Woodside's chairman is Richard Goyder. Everyone knows Richard. He's the chairman of the world. Richard is saying Greta is wrong. Richard is offering BHP 15, maybe $20 billion for all of its oil and gas assets. This makes BHP very happy because its boss, a guy called Mike Henry, reckons Greta is right. He wants out of fossil fuels so he can concentrate on what he calls forward-facing industries like potash fertiliser because we all need to eat, and nickel because we need to build batteries that go into our Teslas, which very few of us have. So the two companies are talking about how to transfer the big Australians' embarrassing energy assets over to Woodside. It is nice that they are actually talking. A couple of years ago, Woodside's former boss, Peter Coleman, had a screaming match on the phone with BHP's former CEO, Andrew Mackenzie. They ended up actually hanging up on each other.
So who's going to come out on top, Woodside or BHP?
Richard's betting the farm on fossil fuel having a very bright future. If he's wrong, Woodside is stuffed because there's no plan B. Woodside says it's looking at hydrogen and other renewables and all that kind of stuff, but really all its eggs are in one great big carbon-filled basket. Its share price has been hammered today. But Richard plays the long game. He's been around and he's looking through the daily froth and bubble of the share market, and he's probably focusing on some new stats that have just come out about Australia's gas exports. They showed that exports to North Asia hit a record high of 72 million tonnes last financial year. Half of that went to China. It was worth $15.6 billion. So Richard's just following the money.
Big risk. Most people reckon oil is a dead duck.
Yeah, most people don't know what they're talking about, though. I mean, nobody really knows. We don't really understand what's about to happen in commodity markets or share markets. We've got an entire industry of analysts and number crunchers looking at share market trends and consumer sentiment and investor sentiment, etc. Computer scientists at Harvard and Oxford trying to develop AI programs to predict what markets will do next. None of it works. Nobody has any real idea about what is happening next. Did anyone warn you about the GFC?
I wish.
Exactly. Think about it. If an analyst at PwC or one of the other big firms really knew what international markets were about to do, would they be earning 200 grand a year writing press releases? They'd be on super yachts, surrounded by supermodels. They're always wrong. We were told COVID would usher in a recession that would rival the Great Depression. Remember that? Did you see what the share market closed at today? It was at 4,500 in March last year. The property market was meant to crash. Rents in Port Hedland are up 50%. We were going to stop spending at the shops. Tell that to JB Hi-Fi. Even Myer's making money. They said COVID would cause us all to lose our jobs, and we are in the middle of a skill shortage so acute it's being felt everywhere. Even state cabinet's not immune. And the Dockers beat the Eagles. Who picked that?
Hey, Willie Rioli's back.
Could be. After 2 years on the bench, he's finally eligible to get back on the field. Good on him. I reckon Willie's probably learned a lesson or two. I'm less sure about whether West Coast has. Have you seen that West Coast is saying they're still confused about the whole drugs thing? Trevor Nisbet has asked Sport Integrity Australia for clearer guidelines about what not to do. Like Willie was confused about whether he could punch cones and swap out piss samples. The West Coast Eagles, the home of Ben Cousins and Daniel Kerr, reckons it still doesn't understand what's right and wrong when it comes to illicit substances.
You think we'll get the grand final?
Well, you'll have to ask State Daddy about that. McGowan wants it, but he's told the AFL it's my way or the highway again. He's throwing his weight around a bit at the moment. He's the member for Rockingham. Footy, National Cabinet, Prime Minister, Clive Palmer. Fair bump. Play on. I'm Ben Harvey.